So friends, it is our next video class, and before I come to the next poem written by John Donne, and the name of the poem is Go and Catch a Falling Star, I would like to give you a very brief introduction of the metaphysical poetry, which is one of the important disciplines of British literature, since it was very new and innovative from the different paradigms and perspectives. There has been a range of poets who is considered metaphysical poets. So, as a term, the word metaphysical refers to the concerns about the fundamental problems of the world. So, in a way, metaphysical poetry is related with the issues about the fundamental problems of the world. Students, what are these fundamental problems which have been puzzling the mind of man from the very beginning? These problems are, or they may include, the issues of life and death. What is before birth? What happens after death? Is there any spirit? Is there a figure who runs the whole world? Is there God? And what are the duties of man as a creature? Is man subject to some next birth? These are some of the fundamental problems which are discussed under the head of metaphysical poetry. And again, this metaphysical refers to queries relating to the philosophical issues about man's position and nature in the world. Metaphysical poetry, friends, also refers to some of the philosophical issues. Here we need to turn our camera towards philosophy or to some philosophical issues. What are these philosophical issues? And first of all, you are supposed to understand the meaning and definition of philosophy. Philosophy means an exercise to discover truth. Philosophy means an attempt to come across truth. This is the main arena of philosophy. What is truth? Where does it lie? And how could we acquaint ourselves with truth? So, metaphysical poetry is also related with some of the philosophical issues about man's position. What is the position of man in human society? Where does he stand? What are his duties as a creature, as a man, as a husband, as a son, as a father? This is man's position and nature. What is the very basic nature of man? Is man full of kindness? Is man full of wickedness? Is man humble? Is he dishonest? Is he cruel? Is he a sinner? Is he like a hero? And sometimes he fluctuates between these two extremes. Sometimes he becomes a very good person, like touching the rank of an angel, and sometimes he becomes a devil. Sometimes he is very honest, sometimes he is not honest, sometimes he takes the right decision, sometimes he is not able to take the right decision. So all these philosophical issues are discussed under the category of metaphysical poetry, right? So this is the definition of metaphysical. And if you again discover the word metaphysics, since metaphysical has been derived from metaphysics, so You could also dissect the word metaphysics. There are two words, one is meta and one is physics. Meta means beyond, and physics refers to this physical world. So you see the phrase metaphysical. So what is beyond this physical world is metaphysical, which one cannot see, but it is believed that it exists. So the questions, the issues, the concerns which are related to that world, which exists but is not visible, and when we discuss the issues of that world, is called metaphysical. So I hope the meaning is very much clear in your mind. So again I summarize, as a term, the word metaphysics refers to the concerns about the fundamental problems of the world and to queries relating to the philosophical issues about man's position and nature in the world and society. Right? Such a label, such a base is applied to all literature. This is very important. We could apply this label to all literatures, since all literatures in their nature, in their temperament, discuss all such philosophical issues. When you read poetry written by Wordsworth, when childhood age is analyzed, when we read The Paradise Lost written by Milton, where the issues of sin and death, where the issues of obedience and disobedience are discussed in a rhetorical way, and when we read the plays written by Shakespeare, particularly when the tragedies written by Shakespeare, and when we come across characters like Lear and Macbeth and Fast and Clown, then we could say that these plays, these works, these treatises are not only treatises but are an account of man's nature and temperament, since these accounts does not contain only tales, only accounts, only stories, but rather they put before us the entire human psyche with their weaknesses and greatnesses, and they also put before us some of the questions and queries which have been always enigmatic, puzzling, and unquestionable. Since man's nature is beyond dissection, man's nature is always unpredictable. So it has been a very philosophical challenge before generations, that where should we go? Which way should we take? Which side should we take? Whenever there are conflicts, whenever there are dilemmas, whenever there are paradigms, whenever there are binaries, whenever there are opposite things, when there are choices, when there are preferences, when there are two poles, where should we go? Should we take the side of Antonio, or should we take the side of Shylock? Should we take the side of Lear as a father or as a king, or should we take the side of Cordelia as a devoted daughter and a devoted wife? This is truth. Is Lear right or Cordelia right? Is Antonio right or Shylock right? These are, I think now you have been able to understand what is philosophy. Philosophy has not been merely a subject of some of the philosophical issues, questions, and concerns, starting from Plato, Aristotle, and so called the chain continues. But in a way, since you have been present here in the class, so what are your duties as a student? What is your role? And What should be your role? At this particular point of time, you are a student, since you are in the class, but when you leave the class, you become a citizen, you become an adult boy, and when you enter the society, you should be you are expected to behave in certain ways. So are you able to behave accordingly or not? These are some of the philosophical questions and issues, and literature, in a way, invariably, literature discusses such things. This is one of the, you know, chief features of literature, that it is very much philosophical in its nature. Since literature does not portray the mountains and lakes and oceans, they are only external objects present in poetry or in works. But beyond them, there has been a distinctive, you know, approach of the writer, which is trying to catch hold of something more significant. And what is that significant item? That significant item is that truth where we are expected to reach. That's why Shakespearean tragedies and comedies are not merely tragedies and comedies. Poetry is not merely poetry, but it unlocks something more. And what does it unlock is philosophy. That's why further, when you study further, you equate poetry with music, you equate poetry with philosophy, you equate poetry with different fine arts. So I think this association or the link of philosophy to literature, or this interconnectedness, I always emphasize the approach to study literature is this interconnectedness, this intertextuality. When this approach is acquired, when this approach is inculcated, one can really enjoy the works of literature. So, such a label may be applied to all literature, but it is specifically used to designate a kind of poetry that was in vogue. Vogue means fashion in the early 17th century. John Donne was the primary figure in this development that show the imitation of an approach to the poetic form, which was in many senses a departure from the practice of the Elizabethan period. So again, it is a question to be asked naturally in the class, that what are the features of Elizabethan poetry. So I have discussed all these things when we read Ice and Fire written by Edmund Spenser. But this Elizabethan period has also been in your syllabus, so you should go through in detail with the help of W.H. Hudson's book, An Outline History of English Literature. Or you can also take one very popular book written, an anthology for BA Part 1 by Jasbir Zain, a very reputed professor from Rajasthan University, Jaipur. There have been many books written by professors serving in the department of Rajasthan University, and we should also know the names of some of the renowned professors, academicians, thinkers and scholars from different universities and colleges, along with the departments, along with different things. And this is the approach which you should carry on. This kind of poetry is characterized. Now, what are the major features of metaphysical poetry? This kind of poetry is characterized by its intellectual vigor unconventional use of language, and a playfulness manifested in innovative use of the poetic medium itself. The metaphysical poets wrote both secular and religious poetry. Such a combined interest was a reflection of certain preoccupation of the age. The secular poems of Donne and his followers are alive to the experience of contemporary voyages and discoveries, theories of the humanists and the scientists, and the interest of the Renaissance man, while the religious verses of the group can be seen in the context of contemporary religious debate, question of faith, and spiritual elegies.